Okay, in this video we're looking at some improvements to our Blender game. So first of all, let's look at the Blender game that we had. Which is this game.blend. Okay, I go ahead and open Blender. And open up that game. Alright, this is the game that we have. You want to make sure that you're in Game Logic and Blender Game. And if you click on the 3D view and hit P for play, this is what we had so far. We could put down blocks, and the red ones are immovable and the blue ones are with enter. And there's a few things that we kind of don't like here. One is if the block moves out of the screen, we can't see where it goes. And another one is that these blocks aren't really equally spaced. We'd like to be able to also build the blocks up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up a completed game, game 2, that has some of these things already done. So let me just show you how game 2 works. Okay, I will go ahead and put some red blocks, and as you notice, the camera is moving with me. And I'm using my left, right, forward, backward. The camera is always behind. If I do shift up, then that makes me go up. And the player block is one that doesn't fall. Okay, so I can go up, I can go down, I can actually go underneath the board or the plane. And I can still do these guys. And also everything now is on a nice grid. Alright, let's look at some of the things that are different here. We'll start with the camera. So the camera following the block, we have a, let me go out of, oops. Okay, so here's the camera back here actually. If I click on this, it's a right click to select it. There are two properties that make this follow the block, and I'll show you how these can be adjusted. So if we look at the properties of this, if you click on this here, I have selected the player as the parent of the camera. That means the parent is really part of, the camera is really part of the player. Alright, so if I take that off, and there's also a camera setting here, there is focus. So I could take that off. Now let's see what happens if I play the game. So now you get this kind of fixed view. Just like we had before, where what really happens is the previous, so whatever view you're in right here in the 3D view, that's just what continues to happen. So I could zoom in, I could change which angle I'm looking at, but so by default that's just what we see. Alright, if we want it to be from that camera, you can look here, View, Cameras, Set Active Object as Camera, and that is the camera. So the active object there is the camera. So let me set that as the camera. Alright, now let's go ahead and, so that camera is looking at a fixed point. And so this is the same kind of thing, except it's wherever that camera was pointed. Right, now we want to do these two properties, so first we'll do the focus, see what happens. See, that doesn't quite do it. But then if we go up here under the these properties, there's the parent, set it to the player. And now we have this following the player. Okay, once you have this set up this way, I'll go ahead and view, let's see, this kind of thing. Alright, so there we have the camera, and we see that it's pointed towards the player. And so when we view through it, we see the player. Alright, and there's two things that you'll need to adjust here. One is the location, and one is the, well, all of these here. Adjust what you see through the camera. So location controls how much of the scene you'll see. We can also control that with the zoom here. That doesn't seem to have any effect, so we'll just leave it alone. Okay, so if I put this X, if you look at the coordinates here, Z is up, Y is to the right, and X is in just the way I have it right now. X is in this direction towards the camera. Okay, so if I change this to be something smaller, I'll be closer to the block, and then I would have to change how the camera is rotated as well. So I'd have to rotate it. You can just play around with the angles here, and if you don't have a good feel for what angles to use, you can set it like this and see. A good thing to do is to start at 0, 0, 0, and that's just pointing down. The camera's pointing down along the z-axis and with up along the positive y-axis, and you can play with these angles here. And as it turns out, if you do 90 degrees on the z, then that rotates this way, and then rotating along the x some amount is what we need, and that amount depends on how far away we are. And I'll have the camera just along the x axis here and slightly up, so I get kind of a top-down view, and it's just along the x-axis. I think that I had this back at 30 and this was at 70. See if that looks alright when we go into this view. Okay, so that's the way it looked. And that's how you get the camera to follow the object, which makes you able to build much bigger structures. If we're making this kind of like my kids were asking if this could be a Minecrafter game. So if that's what we're thinking, then we can build much bigger things this way. Alright, something else that we have is the movement is much more on a grid here. We'll go ahead and take a look at the movement. Okay, for the up arrow, I have that going along the x-axis, and that was this one here. It's moving -2 On the x-axis, the reason is because this block has a radius of 1, which really means the dimension is 2 by 2 by 2. Alright, so if we look on the up arrow here, the only difference is that I've clicked the tap. So what this does is it only triggers the event once per keystroke. Alright, they could just call that something else, but so all my up, down, left, right arrows, I just click the tap there. Alright, so that's up, down, and this is left, right, and if you look here, this up arrow, I've given it a name that's only needed if I'm going to use that name over here. This is the left and right, and the left and right, it just goes, so the left, you see that's controlled here, the left goes into here, and then this and goes into here, and this is the left motion, which is 2 on the y. Oh, that's minus 2 on the y, this direction. Okay. Now, there's an extra complication here because I'm using the shift key. If I use the shift and I press up, then I want it to go up in the z direction. If I just press up, I want it to go along the x direction. So then I need to know whether shift is happening, yes or no. This is along the x direction, so it should be not having shift happen. If you see the controller that's going into that now, I have it as an and, it's called and, but the type here is expression. Instead of being and, it's expression. Okay, and down here, if you mouse over, that says it's a Python expression. It's a Python expression of the inputs coming in, and this one has coming in up arrow and shift key. And so I've given those up arrow and shift key usable names rather than keyboard 1, keyboard 2, keyboard 3. Okay, and this is up arrow and not shift key. In Python, and is just and, or is just or, and not is just not. There's none of this ampersand, ampersand, and bar, bar for and or. Alright, that's for the up arrow. For moving along the x-axis, same kind of thing for the down. You have down arrow and not shift. For the z, let's find one that changes the z. This one moves the z up, so this comes in through this and what's coming into that and, you have the shift key and the up arrow. So both the shift key and the up arrow need to be true, need to be happening for this to trigger. I could have put an expression in here as well. It would be, if I had put an expression, it would be up arrow and shift key. That would be the same. Or I could just make it an and. It's the same. The only reason you need an expression is if you need to do something different than these ones that are given to you, and or, nand, nor, XOR, X nor. Okay, so that's getting the X, Y, so forward, backward, left, right, up, and down. And if you wanted to have something that would zoom the camera in and out, then you could add something here. So you would add some controls here, and over here, what would you do? You would change the some properties of the camera. So you would add something over here. Maybe you try changing the location of the camera. So you'd have to select on the camera and put it in under the camera's controller. That would be like, let's go back to this. So you'd click on here, and you'd add some some logic here to do that. Okay. What else did we have? Let me see. Right, the other thing that we had still in here from before was this. I don't know if this is the way we had it before, but there's an empty object. It's an empty cube that has the same scale as this cube, and I made it so that it has the cube as the parent, the player as the parent. So then it'll always this empty object always moves around with this, and so it's just always in front of the player. And I put the adding the red and the blue cubes on this object's properties here, so that what that happens is so if I press tab here, if I press tab, that goes into here, and what happens is it does an edit object, it adds an object, it adds the static cube, and that was this one here, the static cube, which has the static physics property. Okay, so it adds the static cube, and where does it add it? By default, it adds it on top of itself. All right, so that's why I put this here. It just adds it right there, right in front of the player. If I wanted to have it added somewhere else, then I could change the location of this cube. So if I wanted to put it further out, then I could make this a -4 instead of a -2, and then when I add something, it would be added right there. Okay, and then when you press enter, that's this one here, return for enter, you press that, that goes into adding the dynamic cube, which is the blue one, and the only difference is that on the physics, it's a rigid body. Okay, so if I start the game right now, it has the same view, same camera as whatever I'm looking at. That means I always want to start it let's see, I need to go back to that, click on the let's see, click on this camera here, and then set that as the active camera. All right, then play. Okay. All right, so let's say that we want to go ahead and, so this is going to be called game 2. Let us save this as now game 3, and we'll make some change. All right, let's make a few changes. First, let's do zooming in and out. Go back here, click on my camera. The way I have it set up here, I have it 30 units back and 10 units up. That's where the location is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mouse sensor so that if I left click, I'll go towards the cube, and if I right click, I'll go out. So towards the cube would be minus 3 or so, maybe -3 units on the x coordinate and -1 on the z. So if I always change by this ratio 3 to 1, then it'll be going along that line. That's just the way I have it and I won't have to worry about the angle being different. Alright, so let's go ahead and add a mouse sensor, left button. I'm going to do the tap so that I only get the event once each time I click. And I'm going to move the camera. Move it by -3 on the X and -1 on the Z. Okay, and we can already go ahead and try this. Okay, now if I left click, that's not exactly what I want to do. Here on this is still my camera actions here. If I actually click this L for local coordinates, try it again. Now that's what I want. All right, and so what the difference is that either the transformation is being made on the entire world coordinates or in relation to the camera's local coordinates, which are tied to the cube. Okay, so if I do it local, since it's tied to the cube because of this having the cube as the parent, if I do click on it for local, then it's doing -3, -1 in relation to the cube, no matter where the cube is. All right, so that's really what we want. Go ahead and take and do the right click. And this motion is going to be in the opposite direction. We'll go 3 further away on the X and 1 on the Z, and this is again a local that's in relation to the local coordinates. All right. Let's see. And I need to do, if I want to do it so that it only does once, then tap. And if you want to be able to just hold it down, then we can take that tap off and get faster zooming. And this gets kind of weird. Don't know what's happening there. Alright, but this is good enough. Now let's make it so that, alright, so there was a complaint by my kids that they wanted to be able to get rid of things. Alright, so one natural way to get rid of things would be if we had these projectiles actually break through. Okay, so what we want that to happen then is we want a way to make this red block disappear. It's natural then to go to put the action on the red block, which I had on the second layer here. Click on the red block. I will go ahead and add a sensor that says if there's a collision, then I'm going to get rid of it. And that happens to be under Edit Object, End Object. Okay, we can try this out. If there's a collision, there's options here. I'm not going to worry about them right now. Then the object should destroy itself. Let's try. And that happened. You'll notice that the red cube does not get destroyed when it collides with the player cube, and the reason for that is because the player cube is selected as a static object, and these sensors about colliding or being near other objects, they only work for objects with the physics turned on. The physics is sort of turned off on my player cube as being static. Alright, so the red cube cannot sense my cube unless I make my cube not static. I could do that just to see. I could make it dynamic. Of course, then as soon as the block is created, it's already colliding. And not only that, but every time so it makes it harder to actually push these around just by the way I have things set up. So I'm going to leave this as static. Alright, I think that's as far as we'll go. And you can add on to this all you want, or make changes if you want. This will be, I'll put this up as game3 in this directory.